Welcome to 5 at 5 with Stone Law Offices. I'm attorney Brendan Bybee with 5 minutes on retirement plans and your estate plan. This comes from a client question regarding a traditional IRA. And the question is essentially two parts. The first one being, what are the tax implications of withdrawals? How are withdrawals taxed to myself and to my child when they become a beneficiary upon my death? And the second part being, assuming I don't need to live off of these assets, is it more beneficial for me to leave them in the account than make withdrawals and leave them for the next generation to use during their lifetimes when they inherit that? So let me address the first question, which is in regards to the tax treatment of withdrawals. Now, again, we're dealing with a traditional IRA. A traditional IRA is created with funds that have not been taxed. So they were contributed before tax, they were deducted from income taxes, and so they've never been taxed. And so when they're withdrawn, they're going to be taxed at that time. And so hence the question, how do we deal with them at that time? A Roth IRA, obviously, by comparison, those dollars are taxed before they go into the account, and so there's no tax on withdrawal. So with a traditional IRA, generally when you're dealing with investments, they may be something as ordinary as stocks or mutual funds. And those types of assets are generally experience a capital gain, or you end up having to pay capital gains taxes when you sell those assets, and they've appreciated in value from the time that you purchased them. Now, qualified retirement accounts, which IRAs are, they have different kinds of rules, and one of the things about them is you're putting money away into this fund in order to save it for retirement, and it's incentivized by the government to encourage that savings by allowing them to grow over time without any tax during the years that they're growing, and only taxing them later when they're withdrawn. So given that, we don't have to worry about the capital gains tax. As the account is being administered over the years, as you're investing and working with those investments, you can buy and sell stocks and trade them for others in exchange and reinvest them in somewhere else. Dividends can come in, and those are not going to be taxed as they come in and as those sales and trades are made. But you are going to be taxed on the money that you withdraw. And the money you withdraw from a traditional IRA is not going to have to deal with the capital gains tax, which is great in terms of it's going to be simplified. But on the other hand, it's going to be treated as ordinary income. And therefore, it's going to be subject to whatever tax bracket you end up being in. And therefore, also, whatever tax bracket it may move you into. If it increases your income in that given year and bumps you up to another bracket, then you may be subject to a higher tax than you otherwise would have expected. So that's the general rule in terms of how are the IRA withdrawals going to be treated for yourself. Once you make those withdrawals, assuming that you're over the age of 59 and a half, prior to which you have also an additional 10% penalty. So if you're over the age of 59 and a half and you make a withdrawal from your traditional IRA, that withdrawal is going to be taxed as ordinary income to you. Again, when you pass on and that account goes to a child in the next generation, and they receive that, they're also going to have the same. They're not going to have any risk of penalties for withdrawing during under the age of 59 and a half, but they are going to have the same tax treatment as ordinary income when they make those withdrawals. Now, for the second part of the question, which is, if I don't need to live off of these, is it better to leave them in the account, or should I, are there other considerations? Should I make withdrawals, and are there better steps to take there? That's a little bit more complicated of a question. It really depends on what the other assets are that you may be using. If you have something that's very, very highly appreciated outside of the trust or outside of the IRA, it's possible that maybe it doesn't pencil out to sell that off and use that as opposed to using the IRA withdrawals. But on the other hand, since ordinary income is generally taxed higher than, you're generally going to have a higher tax that way than with capital gains, depending on how much appreciation you have, since it taxes at a lower rate. Can be a more complicated question, and certainly something that you should talk to a financial advisor about. But in general, just given the concept that we are dealing with an account that allows for growth over whatever period of time it is able to exist without having annual tax depletion, then generally speaking, IRA, if you can leave the funds in the IRA, you're probably going to be giving the next generation a better gift that way than if you use those withdrawals when you don't need them. And obviously with the caveat that once you hit age 72, you don't really have a choice. You're going to have to take some withdrawals, but you don't have to take more than the required minimum distribution. Now, if you have an IRA in your estate as part of your estate, there are a number of considerations that might be important to you besides whether and how the withdrawals are taxed to you or to the next generation, particularly because of the Secure Act that went into effect this year, and how that affects both the planning and asset protection for your beneficiaries who are receiving those assets. So if you have questions about that, please don't hesitate to give us a call, and we'd love to sit down and help you figure out how to integrate your retirement accounts into your estate plan.